we are staying safe and sound away from coronavirus, and I wish okay you you have no problem, okay, especially in this holy month of Ramadan, and I wish you remember me in your prayers too. I do so. Today we will continue with our discussion concerning the development of our information processing system, right? So far, based on chapter 3 in the Carroll textbook, so far we learned about the different parts of this system in terms of a working memory system, right, semantic, long-term memory in terms of semantic and episodic. And then the next topic in this discussion was the development of, the relevance of this working of the memory systems to the language processing. These when it comes to language processing, information processing system is helpful in enabling us to chunk the long pieces of language into grammatical constituents, and these in the working memory system, and also the long-term memory workings helps the language user to do pattern recognition and to develop based on the knowledge in semantic memory, and then to develop an ongoing discourse of the main meaning of the language communication, and to semantic, our episodic memory, in which our personal experiences are stored, help us to store the gist of what we are communicating, right? And the last major topic, subtopic discussed in chapter is related to the development of the different parts of our memory system. We talked about the development of working memory system, which occurs during the preschooling age range, and this is the evidence is provided through a number of the tests. If you remember, we pointed to the SPAN test, the reading comprehension test, and also scoop task and the like, and it was shown that there is a correlation between the vocabulary acquisition and the development of working memory system. Also, we pointed to a number of processes, major processes like control automatic, top-down, bottom-up, and serial, and parallel distributed processing, and we agreed that in language communication we resource to all this kind of processing, but especially we'll focus on top-down and parallel processing in order to see the context, and this context is helpful in extracting the meaning out of our language communication, right? Now we will continue with the development of long-term memory, and you know that our semantic memory help us to store organize the knowledge related to the objects, to the persons, to the processes, and a number of a body of knowledge related to the skills, to how to do social skills, spatial skills, all right, and based on the Piaget claim, children thinking process are qualitatively different, from those of adults. Of course, this does not mean that the adults just think faster or more accurately than children, but this difference lies in the fact that the adult language, the adult learners, or the adults in general, make use of their organized experiences as a schemata that is one, and this points to the development of long-term memory. That is one main difference between the adults and the children, is that the adults, including us, has already possessed schemata, or a body of organized knowledge in their semantic or the long-term memory, right? And one well-documented example regarding the development of long-term memory is object permanence, which is object permanence, is that when informations about an object continue to exist in our semantic memory. It refers to this object permanence. These concepts refers to children's understanding that objects continue to exist even if they cannot be perceived, right? So the children come to this understanding that even if they cannot see an object, still it exists, and this points to development of their long-term memory, namely semantic memory. Let's detail how do we mean by this object permanence. If we observe very young infants, around 4 months or younger, they operate on an out of see, out of mind principle, in dealing with objects. When an attractive toy is taken from the children, the infant, in fact, and you place it behind an adult's back, the infant may object briefly, they just cry, but rapidly appears to forget completely about that object. So I believe you have experienced this as an adult, right? Especially the mom and dads, right? For example, you show the bunch of your keys, right? And then they want to grasp it. The infants can grasp it, and as you put it, as you will hide it, right? They may cry for it, but for a very short time, and they forget about it. This points to the fact that the semantic memory is still developing. It is not yet completely developed, because they cannot. They operate their reactions to this object basis on out of sight, out of mind, right? That is, they forget it soon. Let's consider the stages of object permanence development. So as soon as the infants grow up and reaches 8 months the age of 8 months, they will search for the hidden object if it is only partially covered. For example, if you just cover it, hide the bunch of keys in your hand, and it is semi-visible, then they search for it. And then this means that they are storing knowledge of that object in their semantic memory. And somewhat older infants will search for objects that are fully obscured, right? That is, the finally achievement is the ability to handle invisible displacement tasks that even if you hide the object, and even you displace it, still they search for it. Why? Because of the development of their semantic memory. All right. Infants, of course, in fact, around 8 months, they operate on the out of sight, out of mind, right, principles. But as the infants grow up, they search for the hidden objects. Again, if you want to detail it, the infant is shown an attractive object, okay, such a toy, a cart, a toy, a cart, or a doll, or keys, as I put it. It is put into the adult's hand. The adult make a fist, put it in their fist. So the key is taken out of view, and while in a fist, the hand is placed under a blanket and the key deposited there. So in order to find the object, the infant must be able to mentally imagine the invisible object, okay, being displaced from one location to another, and then search the latter. So infants typically solve this problem between 18th to 24 months of old. That is around the age of when they are 1 year old. Okay, they are able to imagine, okay, that hidden object, although they cannot see it. If you recall, the Piagetian stages of cognitive development, okay, the first stage is the sensory motor, and then the operational operational stage, right? At that operational stage, the kids, it is the stage where when the children imagination and thinking has been developed, so they can internalize objects without they can have an internalizations of the objects without seeing it, okay? And concrete operational stage, and also formal operational stage, and finally the stage of reasoning, right? Thank you for your texting. And of course, this object permanence is not an isolated cognitive skill, right? But about the same time, that is around the age of 18 months, years old, or 1 year, 24, two related skills are emerging, right? The one is pretend play or fantasy play, okay? I'm sure that you know versus fantasy or pretend play. Can you suggest a synonym for it? The synonym for fantasy or pretend. When you pretend means, yes, not but to imagine, okay? Imagine, imaginary, imagine. To imagine, imaginary. Okay? Right. Images, right. So this is pretend play. When this is related to object permanence, and they denote the development of long-term or semantic memory. When infants are 12 months old or so, they will use the objects in a similar way to the adults. And again, this is a very common experience among the children, and we adults have observed this frequently among the children, right? For example, putting spoons in their mouth, right? The same way we will do that as the adults. That is, they imitate and copy the adults and use the objects in the same way that the adults use it. And In addition, okay, a new form of play develops in which the infant use objects in a novel ways, in a different, in new way. And can I ask you what? Do you have a question, Mr. Isam? Okay, word it. Go on. Like combing a doll's hair with a toy rake, right? Or, okay, this is symbolic play. So this means that infants can understand that one object can stand for or represent another. Or, for example, I see that some kids uses, okay, the pen or the pencils in order to copy the adults. Of course, it is not a good thing to do, but they pretend that they are smoking, for example. They put it among on their lips and do so, right? This is a go on, Assam, if you have a question, Mr. Assam. Yeah, right. The other type, the second cognitive skills which emerge as a result of object permanence. What is meant by play similar? Okay. By here, but play means to act. Okay. They behave similar to their adults in using the objects. Okay. Yeah, as I said, copying. Okay. Copying, right, or imitating. Okay, in this way, this means that they are internalizing the use of the different objects and processes. Especially, okay, it is characteristics of the okay girl, okay, of girls, all right. For example, they wear their mother's shoes, okay, and they act, their way of walking, they imitate their way of walking, or for example, making in their playing, okay, with their playmates, right? They will use a number of objects. The kitchen, okay, the kitchen toys, similar in the way their mom do. They cook, right? That's it. No difference between the two skills, right? Yeah. In the pretend play, right? Pretend play is related to the use of objects, okay, such as comb, such as a spoon, etc. But in deferred imitation, which is the second skill, the child imitates a behavior, right? Seen sometimes before. As I gave you the example, is that the girls, okay, the baby girls, okay, they imitate, right, their mother's way of walking by wearing their shoes. Or, for example, their mom's cooking, right? A famous example is from Piaget's daughter Jacqueline, who observed a tantrum in a playmate and then imitated very closely a day later. Do you know tantrum, all right? Okay. Tantrum? Unreality? No. The word tempt. Okay. Yes, as I told you, Shima. Okay. Baby girl. They imitate their mother's, okay, makeup. This is the use of objects. Pretend play is in relations to the objects. But the second one, deferred imitations. You know the meaning of defer? Defer? Defer means what? Okay, yeah, delay, right? Defer means delay. To do something with delay. Right, okay? In delay, the child see a behavior, an adult's behavior, or watches another child acting in a particular way. For example, a tantrum. Tantrum means seeing somebody crying, or let's say showing bad temper. Habits and nature of children. Tantrum is crying, okay? Screaming, crying, alright? A scene or an event of a child crying and screaming, and then usually later, tomorrow or the day after, you'll see that the child's copy it, right? Or for example, you will see that our kids repeat the words, obscene words, that we don't like our child to say them, but just because he learned it from the others, he repeat those, some taboo or some expressions we don't like him or her to do. Or on the other hand, this is not motion behavior, this is the acting. We are talking about language use, right? Right, okay. And so imitating others' behavior later in time is referred to as deferred imitation, right? And Piaget introduced these concepts and this behavior as a cognitive skills based on the evidence of his daughter, behavior, who observed an infant or a little child, screaming and crying in his in a playmate, and then he imitated the next day. Here again. Now let's consider the development of episodic memory, that is around what age and based on what kind of activities we can decide that episodic memory has been developed. By episodic memory means the development or the understanding the world from our personal viewpoint, right? So this recalling our personal stories and synopsis. Right, here it says the ability of the young children to understand that they are distinct from other persons and that their perspective is thus different and the necessary personal indicates the development of episodic memory. That is the first stage in episodic memory, right? Sahal, we do not say personal knowledge, but personal experiences, personal stories, okay? Because when it says personal knowledge, it is something related to your own characteristic, which is stored in your semantic memory. Right. So the first stage in the development of episodic memory is to recognize that you are distinct from the other individuals. One way to evaluate infants' self-awareness, that is when the child comes to be aware of his own self, of his own being, is to give them the opportunity to recognize themselves in a mirror. Okay, so when the child or infant look at the mirror and he can recognize himself different from the others, then this is the first stage in development of episodic memory. And there is an agreement among developmental psychologists that such self-awareness emerges after 4 months. Okay, that is at the age of 4 months old, the child comes to see himself or herself different from those around him. right? Sorry. To continue with the development of episodic memory, based on the findings of the different studies have revealed that most people cannot recall events before their third birthday party, right? And Peterson, Grant, and Boland report that the 6 to 9 years old children recall earlier memories than older children and adolescents, that is the adults. So the more you grew up, the less you can remember what happens to you before your third birthday. Okay, the memories that they are likely to lose over a period of years. I'm sure you agree that, of course, there may be some people who are exceptional in remembering the events and their personal experiences before the age of 3, but on average, we cannot remember much from that time. This means that, at that time, our episodic memory has not been developed yet, right? And a 2-year-old baby, okay, maybe the 2-year-old baby can watch another child and later to recognize that child and recall what the child did, but unable to encode the experience. Okay, it is to come up with toward that experience. That is, I am now watching another child in a personal way. That is, to relate a story related by relating means to tell a story in relation to another child he has come across. So a young child may recall an event, part of their semantic system, but not from a personal view of the event, which would be part of the episodic memory system. So up to the age 2 still, right, Shima? Okay, let me be done with my my sentence, and then I come to you, Shima. That is, by the age of 2, the child just can recognize himself from the others, but unable to tell a story about anything. And this points to the that the episodic memory has not developed yet. Yes, Shima, go on. Shima, do you have something to share? Yeah, they can remember, but not the events before the age of 3. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, go on, Shima. What's the point?
Can you hear me, Doctor?
The age of 3. Good afternoon.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
I have a comment about this topic. Yes, I suspect that episodic memory is available from the birth, but they don't begin to become entrenched a long-term memory until about 3 or 4.
Right.
That
Yeah.
said, a
Okay,
traumatic
around the age of
experience,
4.
like touching a hot stove. Yes, that's it. A
Yeah.
traumatic experience like touching a hot stove before age 3 might be
Right,
well
yeah.
remembered.
Okay.
Yes, I think
Yeah,
episodic memory begins to develop in early childhood.
Yeah. I remember, as a mom, I clearly remember.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, as a mom, sorry for interrupting you, Shima, but as you mentioned the event of touching a hot stove, I remember, as a mom, I remember my oldest child when he was 1 year old, okay? he touched a hot stone, the heater, okay, and unfortunately, right, he burned the tip of the finger, okay, was badly, okay, burned. But now he could not remember that event. When I ask him or when I relate those stories, he cannot
Of course.
remember, because that event, that experience of being burned was related to the age of 1. All right.
Yes. So children may not have conscious memories of episodic that took place early in their lives. As children develop, episodic memory
Lives,
and long-term
right.
memory both develop, and they remember experience longer than when they were very young. That's what I have.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you too. All right. Good. And the last point about that is, as I stated, a 2-year-old may be able to watch another child and able to recognize that child and recall what that child did, but he cannot tell about that experience from a personal point of view. And that's all with our discussion concerning the information processing system. And if you have questions, please raise it. Otherwise, I will shift to another topic I assigned to you, that is social interactionism. And in order to respond to some of the questions, I would like you for next week, okay, to be able to respond to the thought questions below page 65, okay? Thought questions, I says, 2 thought questions on page 65 in Carol, okay, in Carol text. Good. And I will put an assignment for you, like similar to the previous assignment on the offline elements, and then you will respond to that. Very good. Is anybody ready for any presentation today? As I remember, and I put it here, Mr. Ali Hassan Musa and Shima are, yes? Good. Another thing is that I ask you to announce a date for your midterm exam. Did the class came to agreement concerning the date of exam? Of midterm exam? Yeah, Ali Hassan Musa as the class representative is typing. Not yet? Why not? Yes, you should tell me. I ask you to announce the date this week. So I expect the class to announce the date with which you are, okay? You are thinking and making it after Ramadan. Yeah, the exam can be after, yeah. We can have it for at the end of this month, or even at the beginning of next month, that is at the beginning of Khordad. Don't you have my voice? Why not? So please, okay, announce a date soon. Otherwise, I have to do so. Okay? Very good, Araya. Mr. Ali Hassan Musa. Okay? I didn't want to deprive you from your choice, okay? I just wanted to give you the choice to fix a time which is comfortable for you. No, my voice is clear, I guess. Do you hear me? Yeah, Mr. Isam has problem. Very good. Now, let's turn to social interactionism as another major school of thought within developmental psychology, right? I assigned it to you last session to go over it. I hope you review it, and now you are prepared to have some talk about it, right? Why? Because it's as I stated, a major school of thought in psychology. So far, we reviewed cognitive approaches in terms of information processing models and also Piaget constructivisms. The cognitive approaches, as you know, emphasize on the learner's cognitive involvement in learning. That is, the learner the voice is clear, Mr. Isam. Probably you have a problem. Learners' active involvement in making sense of language input. That is, any individual is mentally active when he or she receives some input. By input here we mean language information. But one criticism laid against constructivisms, as we review it in relations to Piaget proposal, was that the social nature of language, that is the context in which language learning takes place, or learning in general takes place, is ignored. So it is necessary to consider the social nature of language communication, which is emphasized and concentrated on in social interactionist perspective.
All right, that's it. So the social nature of language is needed to be emphasized in learning. Now, is it okay now? My voice is clear now? All right, that's it then. Right. I was just pointing to the main premise of cognitive psychology, who emphasize on the role of individuals in language learning being mentally active. But one problem with this kind of school of thought is ignoring or overlooking the role of context in which learning and in general and language learning in particular occurs. And this factor was taken into account by the school of thought initiated by Vygotsky and his follower, namely social interactionism or interactionist perspective. Two major figures in relation to interactionism are Vygotsky or Vygotskian school of thought, and also Feuerstein, who views children as social beings, as humans are social beings. Okay? They are born into a social world, all right? And learning occurs not only through individual involvements, but through interaction with other people, right? This is a factor which cannot be ignored in learning and language learning. Why? Because through interaction, we make sense of the world around us. That is, we understand the world through communicating with others, through interacting with the others. And this has a pedagogical implication. That is, it has a lesson for us as language teachers. That is, we learn language through interacting meaningfully with others. Okay. This was an overview and introduction of a social interactionism school of thought. Now let's consider the Vygotskian main viewpoints. Right? Vygotsky claims that language is a means, okay, that this is a tool, is a vehicle for transmitting the culture, right? It is this cultural norms and the values, right? Right. Language help us to develop our thinking process, and learning occurs through language interaction. Okay. Vygotsky approach was holistic, right? Rejecting the idea of breaking down the learning point into discrete subcomponent, right? Being taught as discrete skills and items, right? Okay. So unfortunately, it says the applications of social interactionism view to language teaching has been little, right? These ideas, okay, were represented into two of most influential publications Vygotsky named Thought and Language and Mind in Society, right? And as I stated, he believes in develop a holistic approach to learning, and he argued that meaning should constitute the central aspect of any unit of study, right? Therefore, in learning language, the focus should be on meaning in its totality, all right, rather than just acquire knowledge, rather than focusing on knowledge being represented in isolation. That is, bit by bit learning is condemned by Vygotskian school of thought. That is, learning does not happen in a linear order, that is, in an additive linear order. That is, knowledge is not the accumulation of the separate pieces, but the totality of meaning is taken into consideration. Very good. Thank you for following me. Two major concepts were derived and introduced as a result of this school of thought. One is the concepts of mediation, right? Mediation comes from the word mediate, okay? Mediate. How do you mean by mediate? Mediation, right? Comes from, all right? Very good. To meddle, come in between. right? To mediate means coming between. Of course, this coming in between does not mean to interfere, right? Because interfere means as a negative meaning, but coming between in order to offer help. So, in particular, based on these concepts proposal, it is believed that learning occurs as a result of interaction between people with different levels of skill and knowledge, okay? Especially the role of advanced learners such as teacher, parent, peer, okay? Who enjoy expertise, who are skillful, okay, and more knowledgeable, so they could assist the others to learn, right? That is, the more experienced, the more skillful, okay, the more knowledgeable, like teachers, like tutors, like instructors, all right, who try to help learners to make sense of the concepts, all right, of the meanings delivered to them. This means the mediator, in fact, tries to assist and offer aid people and offer helps to, okay, less advanced to move to the next level of knowledge and understanding. And in this regard, the second concept, which is a key concept in learning, is the zone of proximal development, which is, I don't know if you have heard about it in your language teaching classes, abbreviated as ZPD, okay? The zone of proximal development. Yes, the difference between what a learner can do without help and she can achieve with the guidance and encouragement from a skilled partner, as texted by Sarmad Muhammad Naeem. Let me give you a more classical definition of the zone of proximal development. Zainab Jabbar Muhammad also texted the space between what a learner can do without assistance and what a learner can do with adult guidance. You are right. But a more classical definition of zone of proximal development is this: the distance between the child actual developmental level as determined by independent problem solving. That is the distance between the ability to solve the problem, all right, and the level of potential development. So actual development in problem solving. So it says the distance. Distance is the more classic definition of zone of proximal development, that is the distance between, right, the actual ability to actual ability of independent problem solving, and the potential development of problem problem solving under adult guidance, under adult guidance with more right. This is a more classical, alright. Okay, and here, yeah, the encouragement, okay, and helping learners to raise their self-confidence, to increase their self-confidence in order. So it's the matter of the distance between the potential and actual problem solving. If we are able to solve a problem, to reach the stage of solving the problems independently through, okay, the help we receive from the advanced the adults, such as parents, teachers, or skillful experience and more knowledgeable adults, right? And this is here, okay, it gives us the image of a child developing through interaction with adults with greater expertise. This has a powerful impact in psychological and educational thinking, and this kind of mediation and this concept is this gap is bridged through another concepts emerge as a result of concepts of as a follow-up to mediation and ZPD, that is scaffolding, which is not mentioned in the text, but in the text by Williams, but scaffolding is a very important interrelated concepts to mediation and zone development. Scaffolding, would you find scaffolding or just suggest a synonym for it? By scaffolding, we mean, of course, already it was implicated in what you stated. Sorry, I'm just clearing my words. Support, yeah, given to the learners who are. So scaffolded means support. Guided support. So scaffolded is in fact is guided participation. Participation. Scaffolding is guided participation, right? That is through their participation in culturally patterned activities, right? You know that our activities are also culturally patterned. This based on the society culture. Depending on what society we are living in, our activities differ from one culture to other culture. And through this guided participations in socially patterned, culturally patterned activities, children internalize the semiotic systems of their culture. By semiotic systems of communication, science systems of communication. Temporary structure used to support. Yeah, scaffold means this, literal. Mr. Lays Alwan Muhammad Lays Alwan, this is the literal meaning of it. But when that is for building construction, for building constructions we'll use a scaffolding. But when it comes to child development, in terms of their thinking development, and also in his learning and knowledge development. This scaffolding means to have a guided participation in the act of learning, to be able to do problem solving tasks, right? In one word, scaffolding means the guided support and help offered by the adults, experienced, knowledgeable, skillful adults like teachers, like caregivers, babysitters, instructors, tutors, coaches, and the like. And over time, the support is tapered, right, until the learner has fully mastered the new skill or activity. Yes, little by little, as the individual gets to the higher stages of learning, then the amount of support will be minimized. But definitely at each stage of the problem-solving activity, supports, supervision, right? Advisory assistance is needed. For example, in your case, you are MA students, all right, still you need help when you want to when you are involved in academic writing, such as writing your proposal. For writing your proposal, you need to do it under the supervision of the one or two of the group instructors, one supervisor and also advisor, in order to receive the right help to how to construct and structure, inshallah, your proposal, right? That's it. Thank you for following me, right? I'll continue up to 6:10, and then I ask Sarmad and no, not Sarmad, sorry, Basha Shima, yes, and Ali Hassan Musa to do their presentation. So, working together with an adult or competent peer at a level beyond movement level of ability facilitates his movement to the next level. So it has an implication, again, language teaching implications. Two, that teacher experience engagement with the learners, out of which further constructions emerge. That is, the more help you offer, of course, by help and by guided participation. It does not mean that we should provide every answers for the students, right? And but just to provide them with the keys and cues, like what we are just involving it. Okay, I ask you some questions, you provide answer, and then I'll guide you. If your answer is not appropriate, I'll give you keys and cues and prompts in order to fine-tune your answers. So by scaffolding, we mean to provide the students, one way of scaffolding and provide students with feedback to their responses in order to fine-tune their answers, right? In this way, the students can appropriate their language responses. So both teachers and learners, through guided participation, reshape their way of understanding, right? Refine their understanding, their knowledge structures and the meanings they attribute to ideas and events as a result of interactive process. So all this happens through interaction. And based on these concepts, that is the concepts of mediation, right, and scaffolding and zone of proximal development, we can deduce in fair that learning is not a simple process, but it's a complex process. It's a matter of learning, unlearning, structuring, restructuring, right? We will produce personal changes of some kind, and it involves learning, creation of new understanding, being personally relevant. And learning can take a number of forms. We cannot expect individuals, all of them, to learn in the same way. Each will learn in its own way because of the different individual characteristics, different cognitive learning style. And our learning is influenced by the context in which it occurs. As I stated, learning happens in a culturally patterned activities. Results from social interaction, and often it needs to be mediated. And it differs from individual to individual, and it's a long life process. If we have such a view of learning, then as teachers or instructors, we would be ready to offer guided help and support to the learners to change their behavior and encourage them to modify their learning, and enrich their understanding and learning. So this is the main mission of teaching business, to help learners to have their own understanding of learning items. Now we are done with Vygotsky, right? Let's point to Feuerstein viewpoints as another key figure in the interactionism school of thought. His work arose from a practical need. Okay, I'm sure that you read the story of the story behind proposal, right? That is in contrast to Vygotskyan theoretical writing. The work of Feuerstein is more practical, okay, and it's grounded in its implication for classroom teaching and learning. And as stated in by Williams, he was working one of those responsible for the education of immigrants, Jewish children from all the world, right? And you know that at that time the Jewish children suffer from experience very awful so they suffer from emotional trauma, right? And Feuerstein, and this population of the school children, immigrant school children, they appear to be incapable of learning at school. And Feuerstein and his co-workers, they designed way of assessing the true potential of such children. And they try to construct methods to enable them develop a skill and strategy to fight learning difficulties because of the traumatic experiences those children suffered from. And the central concepts a fully effective learner, right? And even children with such kind of emotional trauma can learn things well, even if we have very bad experiences, life experiences. This does not mean that we cannot learn. The child is capable under any circumstance. So he proposed the notion of structural cognitive modifiability. That is another contribution of Feuerstein viewpoints is cognitive modifiability, right? How do we mean by that? Modify means to be able to change in a better way, right? This means that our mental capacity, we can improve our mental capacity. That is, people cognitive structure is infinitely, that is unlimitedly changeable. That is, there is no limit to the change. If we try, if we are willing, if we are diligent and hardworking, we can change our mental ability in a good way, in a positive way, that is to improve it. So no one can achieve the full extent of their learning potentials. So our potential for learning is indefinite, right? Is infinite, but people can develop their cognitive capacity. And this view is in contrast to the notion of critical period. I'm sure that you know about the critical period hypothesis and fixed intelligence as central factors in learning. Some people previously, based on Schachter hypothesis of critical period, do you know about it? How do you mean by critical period? Sahad is typing, so I can draw a breath now, clear my voice. Critical period hypothesis means that, no, not the meaning of it, but the definition of critical period hypothesis. So when we believe that people can modify their cognitive ability, this is a response against critical period and fixed intelligence. You are typing. I'm sure you know about it because maturational in the lifespan of an organism during which the nervous system is especially sensitive to certain environment and stimuli. Can you make it simpler in relation to language learning, for example? In general, it says individual period during someone development in particular is believed to be most readily acquired. So let me make it simpler. Individual beyond puberty, when the mind loses its flexibility. This is the main statement of the proposal, that individual cannot learn things well beyond puberty, when the mind loses its flexibility. Puberty cases in beyond age 12, between 12 to, some says 12 and 19, okay? This is related to critical period. That is, for example, language learning is easier, second language learning, okay? Yeah. Learning in general, right, this teenagers, just teens, when you are in your teens. In relation, this hypothesis especially was, was a notable one in relation to language learning. That beyond puberty, individuals cannot learn language easily. So younger children can learn language easily because their mind is flexible and mind lateralization has not occurred yet. Very good. The other program, another proposal, exciting proposal offered by Fristein is the instrumental enrichment program, which is built on the notion of cognitive map. Right? Fristein proposed some key factors in the performance of any mental act or activity. One is the universe of content. How do we mean by that? It points to the learner's background experience and familiarity with different kinds of learning content, which affects their responses to the task. That is, the more background knowledge you have, all right, the better, okay, and suitable is your responses to solving a problem. Then the modality of language, another factor which affects your mental activity. That is, whether you are focusing using written language, spoken language, pictorial, numerical, symbolic, or combination of these, right? And the level of complexity, that is the quality and quantity of units of information to carry out the mental act. So learners vary in their ability to deal with tasks of different level of complexity, right? This was the third significant factor. The fourth one, level of abstraction. The level of distance between a mental act and the concrete object or event it relates to. So we know that the cognitively learners differ in their level of abstract thinking. Some are more able to do reasoning, all right, to justify, to infer, to interpret than the others. So we should be careful to move from concrete information to abstract information. First, ask the students to get involved in problem solving which are more concrete than the abstract one, right? For example, in teaching grammar, to provide them with example sentences rather than to provide them with just grammatical explanations. This is how to mean by level of abstraction. The level of efficiency, a combination of rapidity and precision, a balance between accuracy and fluency, leading to most efficient performance of the task. Okay, that is, in performing the task, both accuracy and fluency in delivery of meaning is important. And cognitive operations, that is recognition, identification, classification, ordering, comparing, organizing, analyzing, recognizing temporal or spatial relationship. Do you know temporal or spatial? Temporal, spatial. Temporal, spatial. Saad. You know, we become cognitively active or improve. We can experience cognitive development if we are able to think, to recognize, to perceive, to identify, classify, or organize. Yes, temporal, the spatial means location. How about temporal? Temporal? Temporal is related to what? Yes, very good. Time, right? For example, when students want to write about a personal experience, so time sequences is very important. Okay, they wanted to narrate an event. The location where that event happens and the location and the time sequence is very important, right? Yes. Recalling and formulating hypothesis. And the seventh is the phase of cognitive functions required by mental act. That is input, elaboration, output. Of course, this is not linear. That is, when we receive language input, we need to elaborate on that, the thing that we are just doing, and then come up with an output, the performance. Sometimes the output serves as an input for you, modified output. So the concepts of dynamic assessment is also related to the interactive nature of learning. Assessment is seen as a two-way process. You know assessment, huh? Assessment? Assessment is what? Assessment means evaluation, right? Measuring, evaluation, language tests, right? So based on the concepts of interactive nature of learning, assessment also should be seen as a two-way process. Not just done by a person, one person. That is not, it's not just one-way direction. It is not just teacher-directed activity. There should be interaction between both parties. So dynamic assessment is one distinct school of thought and conceptualizations in language testing. Right? Probably you may be interested in how do we mean by dynamic assessment. This means that it is not just the teacher who devises the tests and who administer the test, but the learners have a role in dynamic assessment. The role of assessor becoming of one entering into a dialogue with the person being assessed to find out the current level of performance of any task. For example, interviewing can be kind of a dynamic assessment. The teacher, the interviewer initiate a question, there is a response, and that response can initiate a cycle of talk between the two parties, and probably the interviewer, the one who is interviewed, can be in a position to ask the interviewer some questions by asking him to to clarify his question, the point he made, by asking questions for clarification, for comprehension check, and the like. This is the way the natural language communication is. Language communication is a two-way communication, not one-way communication. It is bi-directional, not one-way directional. So, in fact, learning and assessment are linked and not separated. I personally, as a teacher, believe that testing is a kind of relearning, right? And the role of mediator is a key factor in effective learning. Overall, based on dynamic assessment, we should not limit students' evaluation just on one test, one test administration, or just based on a test which examines discrete point, but the focus should be on negotiation of meaning. So emphasis on preparing learners to learn both independently and cooperatively, and the emphasis should be on the social context of learning and collaborative work. It is learning how to learn, right? So if we provide, even when we get students in problem-solving activities and help them to solve the problem, and this means it's a better way of evaluating their performance rather than giving them just end of the class or end of the term or end of the midterm test or examinations. The last point is the social constructivism model. That is, they devise a kind of model which is illustrated on page 43. In this model, social constructivism emphasizes the dynamic, not the static, nature of the interplay between teachers, learners, and the tasks. That is, a number of bodies are involved in learning. Learning does not takes place in isolation, not just by learner, and it is not one way. Different factors are involved in the development of learning, as we mentioned, by those significant factors, especially the importance of context in which learning takes place. So teachers, learners, tasks, and context are key factors, interact as a part of dynamic, ongoing process of learning. Teachers select tasks reflecting their beliefs about learning. Learners interpret that task in ways meaningful and personal to them as individuals. So we should not, it has a pedagogical implication again, that we should not expect teachers, learners to understand the things as we wish, as we like, because people have their own way of understanding things, and context as one is very essential factor, which includes emotional environment. That is, the learner's emotional state is very important. They trust, the belonging, self-confidence, physical environment, the class environment, physically, whether it's a well-equipped class, we have access to resources, and also the whole school environment in terms of the staff, the school staff, institutions, and also the wider social environment, that is the social-political environment and the cultural settings. All these very important in the way the people learn. For this reason, learning is considered as a dynamic, ongoing, interactive, collaborative process. And all these factors signifies a set of concentric circles. By these circles, concentric means they are overlapping and influencing each other. And I hope that we teachers will consider all these options and the factors and many variables which affect the learners. Learning, the process of learning, and to be open-minded concerning the array of factors which affects the learner's learning, so to provide the right help and try to identify the obstacles and the barriers to the language learning of the individuals. Thank you. I am done with this topic too. For next time, we will review chapter 4, that is language perception, based on Carol. Now, Shima and Alim Sanusa, are you ready? Language comprehension. Part 2, chapter 4, perception of language on page 68 is for next time, all right? Then I upload these two, the last two PowerPoint on information processing system and also social constructivism on offline elements. So Shima, let me make you a presenter. Shima, which one you are? Okay, Ali Hassan Musa, right? Now, you are a presenter, Ali Hassan Musa. So you can share your PowerPoint. Shima, number 2. Or number 3. Ali is the first, all right. So after Ali is done, I will come to you. And while you are uploading your PowerPoint, I will check for the names. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Even you can install your webcam, Ali Musa Hassan, if you like. Do you like us to see your picture? Your webcam, so we can have your picture too, if you like, of course. No? You don't want to be seen by the others?
Okay.
That's it. If you like, of course. All right, go on.
First, I'd like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to present this topic.
You're welcome. All right.
Our topic is about qualifying. Our topic is qualifying. Just a minute. Yes. Our topic is qualifying individual differences in native and non-native sentence processing. So, research in sentence processing has increasingly examined the role of individual differences in language comprehension. In work on native and non-native sentences processing, explaining the individual differences can contribute crucial insight into the theoretical debate about the extent to which native-like processing is possible in non-native language. There is increasing interest in the role of that native language individual differences may play in contributing the theoretical depth in language acquisition and processing. For example, explaining individual differences can indicate the extent to which language processing is governed by specific or testing about different different accounts of the role of working memory in sentence processing within the context of monolingual language processing. Explaining individual differences can inform depth
Ali Hassan
about
Musa, there
the
are some voices, okay? Noises. Would you please
yeah.
remove those noises? Somebody is talking.
Sorry,
All right. So
I
tell
just
everybody there to be silent. So okay.
just
Thank you.
هدي بس شوية صوت بس هيك شوية ناصر راح ملبو. Hello. Yes, sorry, doctor. I'm so sorry. For example, explaining individual differences uh, can indicate the extent of to which language processing is governed by demand specific or in testing upon different accounts of the role of working memory in sentence processing within the context of multilingual language processing. Explaining individual differences can inform a doubt about the similarities in different between the
Yeah,
differences between native language and
Mr.
non-native.
Ali Hassan Musa, this is
Yes,
not the right slide. Okay, you should change the slide.
sorry. Yes, yes.
Ah,
This is the slide.
right.
I am adding an
After
article.
introduction.
Sorry. Yes, yes, yes. We are in an
All right.
introduction. Okay, thank you. Native language and non-native language processing theories that predict first and second language processing are quantitatively similar would provide that second language processing be native like inappropriate individual differences are accounted for. رحمن رحمن sorry دكتور صوتي شوية حاجة سيد ميم sorry دكتور I'm so sorry yes despite despite this interest in the individual differences that context to which psycholinguistic tasks can consistently index individual differences in sentence processing has not been systematically explained and
It is
to
examined. Right.
date. Yeah, yes, sorry, examined, and to date, we unaware of any study that has examined an issue from the perspective of second language processing.
All right.
So, yeah. So this is the stark contrast to other areas of bilingualism research, for example, research on second language proficiency, where assessing the reliability of measures of individual variation is written. However, assessing how well psycholinguistics tasks can measure individual differences in a crucial as one can only meaningful correlates to variables when it can be shown that there is a systematic variation in individual measures to being with this variance can be reliable measured. In second language processing, In second language research, one can only measure shared individual variation being a measure of individual differences and measure of sentence processing if there is a systematic variation in both individual measures to being with. Next slide. So these issues have important consequences for research in first and second language processing. Research in psycholinguistics and by extension second language processing has almost exclusively used tasks for the experimental psychology tradition. In psycholinguistics, experiments, the researcher typical aims to minimize between subject variety, as much as possible. The fact that research in the second language sentence processing relies to tasks from experimental tradition entails that second language research cannot take granted that such tasks should be able to consistently measure individual differences. So, one challenge to studying individual differences in sentence processing is experiments typically adopt a Latin square design in which participants do not see all variants of the same stimulus. For example, the first example 1a. While Mary washed, the boy in the room ate an apple. 1b. While Mary washed, the boy in the room ate an apple. 2a. While Simon
Version, there
helped
is a pause and punctuation marks are used.
what?
I
Sorry.
mean in the second version, right, which is not seen by the participants, there are pauses by inserting commas.
Yes, yes. Okay. I will talk about this. Yes. 2a. While Simon held the reporter in the library, denounced the government. 2b. While Simon held the reporter in the library, denounced the government. So, in a study of guided by sentences, participants read typically ambiguous sentences like 1a, the first example, and 2a, and unambiguous controls like 1b and 2b. The temporary ambiguity areas in 1a and 2a because the boy and the reporter may be initially interpreted as the direct object of the preceding verb. So, when it's the subject of the main clause, for example, about the examples of 1b and 2b are unambiguous controls demonstrated by a comma. So, the temporary ambiguity leads to longer reading times in demonstrating verb like ate and denounced, where the direct object interpretation becomes impossible in 1a and 2a compared to 1b and 2b. So, although such effects may be observed at the group level of nature of Latin square design means that individual participants may not clearly show the effects to the different lexical materials used across as sets of sentences. For example, a subject who sees ambiguous in the sentence of 1a but unambiguous for sentence 2b may not clearly shown the expected garden bath effects merely because dinost is longer than the less frequent that eight than eight sorry than eight. So across participants, the Latin square design should eliminate such issues. For group level, any assessment of subject level uh, in individual differences. So James and others in 2018 recently investigated this issue in second sentence processing in a self-paced reading experiment. They investigate individual differences in the use of verbose information in the sorry, and there is a solution of systematic ambiguity and increased processing different observed in processing objects compared to object relative clauses. They also investigate individual differences in offline measures investigating comprehension, accuracy of verbose and relative clause sentence and in addition tested interpretive proficiency in ambiguity relative clause attachments. For self-paced reading, James and others in 2018 replaced a previously observed effects of verbose and relative clauses in the group level in a series of spell tab analysis, they found a little advanced evidence, that their experiment consistently measured individual differences for the verbose sentences and those testing the subject and object asymmetry. James and others reported high spelled hub correlation for measures indexing overall participant reading speed and overall comprehending accuracy across conditions. This indicates that their self-paced reading experiments could consistently distinguish slower from faster readers. So, James and others found little evidence that their self-paced reading experiments consistently measured by subject individual differences, especially in terms of online reading, beyond effects related to overall reading speed. They concluded that either there is simply no meaningful individual variation in the studied effects to systematically investigate individual differences in the first place, sorry, or the task did not properly measure them. Either way, these results uh, raised serious challenge to the study of individual differences during sentence processing. Up to here, I finished my part. I hope that you benefit from it. I'd like to ask Ms. Shima to start her part. Thank you.
Thank you. And you don't need, as I advised you before, you don't need to read all the sentences on the slides.
Thank
Try
you.
to be brief. All right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Ms. Shima?
Shima?
Doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, your voice is clear. Go on. And Shima, try to be
Yes, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Try to be brief. You don't need to read all the sentences from your slides.
Okay.
All right. I need just
Okay,
the
with the name
gist.
of God,
What you
I will
learn.
start. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, with the name of God, I will start my presentation. Before start the first one, I will talk about this and give an illustration about the topic of garden bath sentence. In psycholinguistics, a garden bath sentence is a sentence that is temporarily ambiguous or confusing because it contains a word group which appears to be compatible with more than one structured analysis. Yes. Garden bath sentences are also sometimes misinterpreted by both L1 and L2 speakers. Christensen showed that all sentences like A1, 1A, initial direct object misinterpretation, like Mary was the boy, lingers after disambiguation with participant answer comprehension question, cropping interpretation of the temporary ambiguous. Noun phrase, like did Mary wash the boy, incorrectly more often ambiguous compared to an ambiguous sentence. This is non-alineal misinterpretation, as the initial direct object interpretation is not fully erased. Okay, if we ask, what does the theoretical account predict about differences in garden bath effect? We can say it predicts that L1, L2 processing are qualitatively similar. Hope would predict that any L1, L2 differences in garden bath effects or linear misinterpretation should be influenced by individual differences. For example, such theories would predict that any L1, L2 differences should be attenuated as L1 proficiency increasing. Existing studies have, however, not provided consistent results in this regard. For example, report some effect individual differences in proficiency in that L2 with higher proficiency has higher comprehension accuracy and generally quicker reading time, but the proficiency did not interact with their ambiguity calculation. Here's the second slide. In this study, we examine garden bath effects in coordinate sentences like 3A. The cat is temporally ambiguous and may be interpreted as being coordinate with the dog as the direct object of washed or the subject of the second clause. The later interpretation turns out to be correct at play, but reader initially compete to be coordinate interpretation during incremental. Woods and Nicol examined that L1 and L2 processing of temporally ambiguous sentence like 3A compared to an unambiguous control containing comma after the dog. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, your voice is clear. Go on.
Yes, okay. For the ambiguous, then an ambiguous sentence.
I turn off my mic so your voice will be clear to your friends too. There won't be echo. Alright?
Okay, doctor, yes. So an ambiguous control containing the coordination, but in self-based reading experiment, both L1 and L2 showed longer reading times at the disambiguated verb as evidence of garden bat effect. Kane also examined offline comprehension and found some evidence of lingering misinterpretation. However, comprehension questions that tapped lingering misinterpretation specifically were only asked after a small minority of trials, and such as it difficult to assess the extent to which misinterpretation linger in L1 and L2 processing of coordinate ambiguation. Based on this study, Kane also tested for individual differences processing by proficiency, but did not find any significant effects. Please, the second one. Yes. However, the nature of the interaction needs to be considered, as the L1, L2 differences was largely driven by L2 having significantly higher accuracy than L2 in the unambiguous condition, while differences in the ambiguous condition were not significant. We thus do not interpret this interaction as indicating more difficulty in analysis in L2 learners. We also do not draw any strong conclusion about why the L1 were less accurate than L2 in the ambiguous condition, as other studies have not reported this find. We note how this limits our interpretation of group by ambiguity interaction. These results highlight a broader issue in interpreting interactions. Sometimes such effects are interpreted in terms of differences score, but these are difficult to interpret in the case of baseline differences between groups. The second slide, please. Yes, quantifying individual differences in bilingual sentence processing. Kumar and Have distinguish task from measure. In experimental tasks, researchers typically calculate difference scores between conditions, for example, the garden bath effect in our study, while in measure, such as proficiency tests, there are no impulsion and scores are based on overall performance. So, we have recommendation. Roder and Kumar have a recommendation. They recommended researchers focus on measure rather than task when examining individual differences. Further assessment of measurement reliability with other tasks such as eye tracking is required to examine. Also, increasing the number of observations per participant helps better estimate the effect at the participant level by minimizing trial level noise. Also, having more observation per participant will help here. Self-paced reading participants speed up over the course of an experiment, which attenuates ambiguity effect. The next slide, please. The conclusion. Although individual differences are of increasing theoretical interest in L1 and L2 sentence processing, there has thus far been little research on measurement reliability in the L2 processing. literature. Despite its importance in assessing individual differences, we examine garden bat effect in L1 and L2 speakers in self-paced reading experiments and test the extent to which our sample constantly measured individual differences. Although at the group level we found evidence of individual differences, bad garden effect during processing and lingering misinterpretation in the differences in the size of the garden bat effects, either online or offline. So, if we ask ourselves this question, what must we do before searching for individual differences in L1 and L2 sentence processing? We answer, we must first assess the extent to which psychologists are able to reliably gauge such differences. Thank you. This is my presentation. Thank you for your patience and for listening.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim. And as I mentioned it several times, please, in the future presentations, try to be as short as possible. But the topic was interesting. Thank you. This is enough for today. Next time, as I said, some of you mentioned the next week discussion, Chapter 4, Language Perceptions in Carroll textbook. And I hope 2 of you will be ready for your presentation next time. I'll stop recording.